Thanks for tuning in. I'm Joel Amadon, and this is The Road to Better Teaching, a podcast series where we discuss stories of educator development. No Ann today, but we do have Kelsey Dodson here. Kelsey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm sad Dr. Monroe's not with us, but still glad to be here.
She wishes she could be here for this conversation, but we're so glad that you said yes. I know you've been a part of my family's life for a while, and also too just seeing the Dodson name around. I'm a math educator too, is good as well. But just again, thank you for saying yes.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so can you give a little introduction about a little bit of background about your journey before we dive into some of the questions?
Okay. Where to start? I'm currently in the Principal Corps program.
Nice.
So I am, just making my way through that. But I guess to give you a synopsis of where I am in my world, I taught algebra for 3 years at Hernando High School, and then I was a counselor, and I was a senior counselor there for a year, and then I married my husband. We married before that, but and then we moved back to Oxford because he was student teaching at Oxford and moved to Hernando for me, and then Oxford called and wanted us to come back this way.
Nice.
And so, side note, he teaches AP Stats and Algebra 1, and also is a football coach at Oxford High School.
And a valuable clinical instructor.
Yes,
I will say that too.
Yes, he loves to have his student teachers every year. We talk a good bit about what's happening in the classrooms, and so that's what's fun. So basically, my world is education. When we go home, we talk about, 6 years of our 8 years of marriage, we worked together.
Yeah.
No, 7 years of our 8 years of marriage, we were in the same school. So there's something to be said about it.
Yeah.
I very much miss him this year. I miss that and being at the same place.
Building.
But, luckily I still know some of the names of the kids and, know some of the families so that I can still, and then of course being part of football, you kind of become a family and I get to know the kids in a different light than I knew them even as a counselor. So I was a counselor at Oxford High School for 6 years.
Yeah.
So 11 years. This is year 11 in education.
So when my son graduated, was that your last year?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 years ago?
Yeah. No,
wow. Yeah.
I can't believe he's been in college that long. It's crazy.
I know.
And I remember with Dr. Monroe, Dr. Monroe was actually my first teacher in education in the School of Ed.
Oh, hey.
She was.
There you go.
And I remember when she was my teacher, George was little, like,
Yeah.
maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So it's full circle for
That's
sure.
Right. Yeah.
Everything comes back around.
Yeah.
It's fun.
And it's kind of a unique thing about Oxford. Mm-hmm. I always talk about it being like an overlapping place where, there's folks, like you see each other at the football field, you see each other at the Starbucks, you see each other. I give a story about Claire Fern now. She was Claire Rick, but she was my Starbucks barista, then she was in my class, then she was a grad assistant, then she was my Annie's teacher, then she was Jack's teacher, and it's just like, it's kind of a small town.
Different perspectives.
Yeah.
That's kind of a lot of what I'll talk about today is just the perspectives of things.
Nice.
So it's fun that we've kind of made that connection.
Yeah. So, and also just the counseling connection, now the ed leadership connection, and then also my first clinical instructor, he got his master's in counseling, and so like that perspective on being an educator too, I'm fascinated by. So, all right, so let's get into it. So we're gonna do the interview countdown. So we always start with thanking 3 teachers or 3 educators who have shaped your development as a person.
I've got a lot of educators that have shaped me. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But to narrow it down to 3 teachers, I would say my kindergarten teacher, Miss Becky Farned. She taught me to read, which is the foundation of everything.
That's right.
With education. But she made school fun, and I'll say she made school feel like home to me. I used to love to not even go to recess and to be in the classroom with her and to just like help her get ready for the day. So I was in in training to be a teacher.
In training, yeah,
for
that's right. Yeah.
a long time, but she made me love it. And she cultivated cultivated a love for creativity in me,
Yeah.
which was really important. My third grade teacher, I guess is number 2, Miss Pat Allen. I earned my first B in her room.
Okay.
And so there was a long time that I would say, I would not say earned. She gave, but you learn. I earned that.
Yeah,
And it really made me understand that perfection is not the end goal. It's just growth.
Yeah.
And so I thank her for that. I
Yeah.
mean, it was tough. She was a tough teacher.
Yeah.
And so that was hard, but you grow through hard. And then I have to thank Miss Stephanie Rogers. She was actually my 10th grade pre-AP English teacher, and then she looped with us and was my 12th grade AP English teacher.
Oh, nice.
So she knew us.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
knew our writing. She knew, our strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
But she cultivated, her and Mary Margaret King at New Albany, I'm from New Albany, cultivated a love of literature in me to a
Yeah.
point that I took extra literature classes in college just because I wanted
Yeah.
to take different lit. I wanted to read books and talk about what they mean. And so, that embedded love of learning has, I have been very fortunate to have such foundational teachers
Yeah.
that really just cultivated so much in me.
Yeah. That's all. I mean, thinking about that, just talking to our 353 class about they're designing lessons for learning. They're getting that, and that what you just talked about with that the teacher that loops with you is like they have that relationship with you. They have the relationship with content. Now they're perfectly positioned to develop, put things into play, and to the point where even beyond the class that you're continuing to grow and in your love of literature. That's awesome.
And I would remiss not to, I have to thank Logan. He's my husband. He's an educator that's super important to me. You've kind of touched on it, but his energy that he brings to the table is something that is interesting to see in people. He's not just energetic on the football field. When he's teaching algebra, he brings that much energy.
Yeah.
When he's teaching AP stats, he brings that much energy, and he truly does love his job every day.
Yeah.
And so, when you see that, you have to get on the train of enjoying your work.
Yeah. Well, and they got a good group of educators too. Because I think because I know Ben Logan is there, and then there's Logan, there's the Logan connection, the Ben Logan Dodson connection. And I know Coach A is there too. It's I know that there's a lot of good folks in the department. So at least ones that I've had interactions through, either through my kids or through here. So, okay. So number 2, recall 2 reasons or events that led you to become an educator.
Well, so one's kind of
Besides
funny.
kindergarten.
Okay,
right? Yeah.
yes. Well, I mean, so obviously I kind of laid the foundation for, I knew in the back of my head forever, I tutored and I did all that kind of stuff. And I loved, I always helped friends in class, tutor. I was in Algebra 2 as a freshman. And so I was in there with some big old football player boys that were seniors. And so, I would always kind of help them in school, and I would help, just different people I was helping in school. So I guess one thing that I would say, let me start by saying my funny one, which is Dr. Goulet's Anatomy and Physiology.
Okay.
I
right.
originally started out as majoring in, I was going to do kinesiology, physical therapy.
Okay, yeah.
And it's just funny how life happens, because it opens so many doors to different things. But anyways, I ended up, that was not what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Through that, I'd taken extra math courses. And so I ended up getting my endorsements I changed my major to elementary education, and then I'm K-12, but then I got my endorsements in math and English. And so I had the extra lit classes, and then I had the extra math classes, so why not?
Yeah.
My intention was never, ever to teach math. It was never, ever to teach English. It was to be a kindergarten teacher. And here we are now. But so that's my first kind of what impacted me to make me become an educator. Just the perspective, or just the getting to where I realize this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit in a class for 6 more years and learn about the human body.
Yeah.
It's not what it's about. So
I'd rather teach some human bodies.
Yes,
That's
yes.
right.
Like I said, in the back of my mind, I always knew that I was going to be in education because of how much I love education.
Yeah.
My mom's always said, Kelsey, no one can ever take your education away from you. And so that's always stuck with me. But my other would be probably growing up in the household that I did. I am the youngest of 3, and so I have 2 older brothers. One of my older brothers, both of them are brilliant and have different strengths. But my oldest brother, he really just never tried. He's very smart, just never really tried, didn't care to try. He could have been an all-A student, but he just, was kind of okay with getting by. My middle brother, he's 2 years older. He struggled in school, and I watched him at the kitchen table struggle.
Yeah.
I watched my family. I watched my mom do everything that she could, getting tutors, getting, there's some math program, Kumon Math.
Yeah.
That there was for a while. I remember we would take him once a week to go do that. So it was like I witnessed that struggle. And at the time, there was an educator that when she mentioned getting special services for, does he have a disability? Is there something lacking here? The teacher at the time told her that she didn't want to do that would label him for the rest of, his schooling and kind of steered her away from it. So it scared her away.
Wow.
And I watched him struggle. I mean, he took the English state test 2 or 3 times to try to graduate. And so watching that, and I remember, there's a vivid memory that we were sitting at the kitchen table. I was in kindergarten, and I was reading. And him looking at my mom and saying, why is it so easy for her and it's not easy for me? And that struck me even as a child.
Yeah.
So I go back to that, and I go back to even my experience, as a kindergartner. There was a student in there, Laurie Beth Ellis, and she was a severe, profound. She was, so I loved being a person that was there for her in class and kind of a protector, kind of like, when other kids were not nice, I would be, there for her. But I just remember wanting to do more for those who it wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
That they weren't getting it. Or so I think that's kind of what laid the foundation for me wanting to do what I wanted to do in education is, not everyone gets it the first time.
Yeah.
And how am I going to be an educator that can help those kids?
Yeah. Give people the services they need in order to, absolutely. Awesome. Yeah. That, I had my mentor, Alice Udevari-Solner, she did so much stuff with inclusive education. It's like, well, if someone just needs a little something, whether it's if they have visual impairment, if you move them closer, you give them a little spyglass, maybe make their worksheets big. Now all of a sudden they can fully participate versus excluding them, from like how can we more facilitate more engagement, right?
What is it? If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, or what is that saying?
Yeah, that's right.
They'll spend their whole lives thinking they can't do it.
Right.
So just meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Is super important. And being that voice for the ones that, don't know.
Right. Yeah. No, perfect. I love it. Okay, so here we go. So this is all about you're on a road to being an educator. So thinking about recalling a moment of professional growth. So what do you think? What moment can we point to as we're talking about being on this road to better teaching?
Okay, so I think right now, I guess I gotta go back. So I was an algebra teacher, counselor. I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that because I wanted to always have perspectives, different perspectives. I wanted to be able, I knew I wanted to be an administrator, and I wanted to be able to look at a teacher and say, I've been where you've been. I get it.
So how long did you know you wanted to be an administrator? Was it like right away?
Right away.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
I had some very strong women in my life that, Susan McClellan, she's one that
New Albany legend?
She's a everybody legend.
Oxford legend,
She literally she sets the bar for what it is to be a classy woman educator who's a mom.
My first boss here.
Yes.
in the
I mean,
department.
she's there's not a job I've taken or a move that I have made in my career that I've not called her and been like, what should I do? Her and Christy Poore was my high school counselor, and so I actually babysat for them. And so I had a different lens that I saw them through. It wasn't just educators at school. I saw them as moms, as friends to one another. But they were very strong in just making me want to be like them. Where were we even going with that question?
A moment of profession. Sorry,
Okay.
I asked. Well, it is conversation, but yeah, I maybe distract. So yeah, that moment of professional growth.
Okay, so so that gets me to where I am. So when I've always known that I wanted to do that. So we kind of got to a time where Oxford School District did several realignments. And so the school is about 2 or 3 years ago. And so it was kind of a fruit basket turnover with everybody. We got a lot of the schools changed, second and third grade buildings. It was just like all over the place.
My
changes.
kids were right in the midst of all that, yes.
So at that time, I was the only counselor in a group of 4 counselors that stayed at the high school. And there were 4 new assistant principals and 1 new head principal. So really, in the leadership roles at the school, I was the only one that was there that had been there.
Uh-huh.
So
where are the keys? Where's everything?
yeah, it was like, but I mean, it was hard.
Yeah.
It was very hard. Because, you're learning a new boss. At this time, I was, 5 or 6 years into education and had 4 or 5 different principals that I'd worked under.
Yeah.
So, every time it's figuring out what they want, what they need,
How to communicate.
what are their biggest things. And so realizing that I had a platform there to be a leader, but I also had to step back and let the leaders who were the assistant principals and the principal be the leaders. How do I also, with a knowing that I want to eventually step out and do principal corps or do an advanced degree, I'm going to have to teach these new counselors that I have that have all been in elementary how to run the high school world.
A little different.
Which is very different. So there was a lot of, Miss Cassidy, gosh, she sat in my office every single day and just, a plethora of knowledge. She was so great to be able to work with just because, she and I were in counseling ed together.
Yeah.
So we were in the same cohort. So it was fun to get to come back together.
Yeah.
But, and Tara Ross and Yolanda Dudley, they are just awesome counselors. But teaching them what the high school world looked like in Oxford is different.
Right.
And so I realized that I was going to have to step back. I'm very hands-on. I'm very, I'll just do it myself.
Right.
You can't be. Because that'll just, it'll wear you down. Yeah. And so that realization, but that really comes to the realization of this year in my principal corps journey, I had a conversation with who was my principal, Chase Goolsby, who I was with at Oxford Intermediate for my first part of my internship.
Did he win an award?
He did. He's actually the Administrator of the Year for the Oxford School District.
Fantastic.
So he's a great one. And it's actually his first year as the head principal.
Nice.
So, he had done some assistant principalships under different people, but this year was his first year as principal. And then Molly McNeely, she came over from Central, and she was the academic interventionist there. And so she has such a plethora of knowledge. So it was actually her first year as an assistant principal. And so we were all kind of just thrown into it. Chase had his background in what to do with principal, but not principalship, being the one that was in charge, which was a whole learning curve for him, whole learning curve for me, because I'm just thrown into, hey, let me learn.
Because part of principal corps, you get placed into.
Yes.
Is it the role, or is it an internship?
It's an internship site, which your clinical, I guess, instructors or your principals can call it what you want it. He always introduced me as, hey, this is assistant principal.
Perfect.
Not so much as an intern, which where I am now, I'm taking the back seat more of like an intern, which is fine. Wherever you go, I think it's just whoever the leader in the building is making sure you're doing what they want you to do. But that was really what was important for me. Is Chase sat me down and just had a tough conversation of, hey, I want you to know that, sometimes it's okay to listen. Just listen. You don't have to always, not in a bad way, but just saying that sometimes you can sit in a conversation and be there and listen and learn from it. And it was kind of tough to hear because, at first I was like, okay, well, what have I done wrong? And it was not out of I've done anything wrong. It was because he cared about me and he wanted me to be a better administrator. And I think, I was able to have a conversation with him, and I cried and he cried, and we came back, and I had a couple of days of reflection. We came back and talked some more. And when we came back to the table, I was able to see a lot of other things clearly through that reflection about myself, that I could say, you know what, in my entire career, I have just been on these fumes of I've just got to do, I've got to show that, I'm smart, but you don't. And sometimes learning that, being the smartest person in the room is not being the one that talks the most. Sometimes it's the one that's just listening to what people are hearing.
Yeah.
And as a counselor, you just hear people say things and you're like, you regurgitate what they're saying because you're trying to let them know that you hear them. Well, that's not my role anymore.
Yeah.
I have learned to do that as a counselor, but that's not my role as an administrator.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was really kind of a moment of clarity for me, that I was like, sitting back and just listening.
Yeah. That's pretty powerful. I mean, even to think, like, if you're, in a PLC or something like that, and you're sitting there as an administrator, and there's some sort of issue that teachers are talking about, and you maybe have some expertise, but then just letting it go, and all of a sudden, like, they come to a resolution without you ever intervening, and now you can see, wow, this PLC's got some power and the ability to, like, you just learned something about the way that they're organized, the way that they can operate, and now, okay, now we can lean on them maybe. Like, you just learned a lot.
And that's how, like, it's funny that you brought that as an example, because that was kind of the reason for us having that talk.
Okay, all right.
Is I had noticed something in a PLC, and he was like, it was not bad what you noticed. Like, that was good. But learning people and learning a time and a space to bring something up is super important, because they maybe were not ready to hear what you had to say yet. What you had to say may have been right. But the time and space and learning people and learning when to interject or when to let them kind of work it out themselves. And I mean, that's what teaching is letting kids learn how to figure it out themselves. That's where they figure things out and are growing.
So that I was thinking about the number one standard for mathematical practice in our Mississippi College Career Readiness Standards is to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them, right? And so, like, with that, there's going to be some struggle, right? And so, like, let them struggle a little bit. And so,
if you're constantly giving an answer back to people, they're not learning anything. They're not learning that life is about struggles and that it's going. Those are what are going to make you grow. And when you look back, anytime I've had a struggle, that was hard to do, but it was some of my most exponential growth as a person. Yeah.
I'm curious, in your your principal cohort is like, and maybe this is like the are you seeing your peers have this similar realization?
I am. Well, and I'll tell you, this kind of connects with it too. Doing these portfolios and doing the artifacts, and you have to. There's so much reflection that goes into it, but they all, what I'm noticing, are kind of flowing into one another. And I think that's part of how the program is. Whenever it's a year stuffed into, it all has to kind of flow. But I think part of my moment, and several of us, it's funny, we, when you do the personality assessments and you have the different, like the dominant personality, and all those, I think that's where my wheels started turning of, oh, my personality type is this. To be in education or to even, be a principal one day, you've got to have all types. If you hire only the same personality types
Oh
as
my
you,
gosh, yeah.
it's going to be horrible.
Yeah.
And so same with like classroom with teachers, you have to start being able to look at systematically what you're missing. What piece of the puzzle are you missing?
Right.
Okay. My math scores are great. We're good in that department. Our English we may need some help with that. So I'm looking for being able to see what type of English teacher I'm looking for. I need more of a soft-spoken one. So really like looking at personalities and figuring out who you need on your team.
Yeah.
But it made me self-reflect because I was going, okay, well, I'm definitely a dominant personality.
Mm-hmm.
How does that look to other people?
Yeah. Yeah. No. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Talk about my son. Like, like that can happen sometimes with him. Like, and seeing like how he works well with others or how he works well within our family, and thinking like, man, if we were all like him, oh my gosh, or all like me, and but we kind of all fit together nicely. But yeah, and well, I guess that's coming in. Just this is a total side question. Like thinking about that. Because all my students right now reference letters, trying to get hired for positions, and thinking about not only are they a good fit for the the position, but also a good fit within the team too. Is like thinking about how do I fit within this collection of individuals, because like we've got to work together, like, and just that's a beyond just I need a job.
Yeah. Well, and that's what our cohort really is struggling with right now. We're like, they're texting me about it right now. It's just like, we are in a place where we're sitting and we're going, we are on the job hunt. Every day's an interview where you're, in your internship sites. Where are we going to be? But also just learning that maybe what we think we want is not what we need, not where we're going to be, but that not to take things personal. When you're sitting in an interview or whenever you may not be chosen for something, it may not be because they don't like you as a person. It may be because they are looking for someone who has a background in X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And so, sometimes that can get muddied with, how school systems can be with, with jobs and who gets what. But I think just learning to take yourself out of it and truly kind of just let go and go where you need or needed, and where your personality or your skill sets are needed. Nice. Is super important.
All starts with listening and learning. So why is this mile marker important to the field? So and why is it, I mean, you talked about why it's important to you in your growth, and if you want as an educator, so if you want to say more about that, you can, but why is it important to the field and thinking about like the standards? That's kind of the hard part sometimes. Yes. Is connecting to the standards.
Well, and these standards are all, I think, I immediately look to Standard 7, which is building professional capacity.
Yeah.
To promote current and future success and well-being of each student and adult. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in the role as a principal intern is the weight of what you're doing. It's not just in the classroom. You truly are just worried about those kids that are sitting in front of you, those students that are your students. As a building administrator, you're looking at the students. You're looking at your staff. Your staff becomes so much more important. Yeah. Their well-being. You worry about who they are as people. Yeah. You worry about families, you worry about parents, you worry about the community at large. And so the weight on your shoulders just becomes so different. So I guess that ties into what I was saying about perspective that's made me shift, is learning to be culturally aware, learning to be aware that there may be a parent, and with assistant principal jobs, this is what you're doing a lot of discipline. Yeah. Which is not fun. Yeah. It is not fun to have to call a parent and be like, I know I've called you 3 other times this week. Yeah. And for them to understand that you're a team and that it's not, you're looking for a solution for their child so that they can learn. Yeah. We all want the same thing. Yeah. Like we're on the same team. Right. Because sometimes I think it can feel differently. It can feel like, oh, my kid's being targeted. It can feel like, gosh, what are we going to do with so-and-so? Right. They just can't get it together. But it's looking for what's preventing them from learning. what can I do to help? What can I do to help that teacher?
Yeah.
And so you really are a problem solver on a whole different level.
Yeah.
And I think just the shift in perspectives of a parent can come in and they can be mad. They're not mad at me. They're mad at the situation.
Yeah.
What can I do to diffuse it, but to also walk out of here with us all feeling like we have a plan
Yeah.
to work together?
Absolutely. That's perfect. And I just like, and thinking about the development of a collaborative professional culture, again, not only with your staff, but with the families that are part of the community that, hey, we're again, we all want our kids to learn and grow. Yeah. So awesome. Do you have a current pocket-sized philosophy statement or professional vision that I know is in the Ed Leader portfolio?
I go back to the quote of, or I don't know who quoted it, but it's just my thought: capture the heart of the kid, and you capture the kid.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of been my philosophy all along. I loved my 3 years in the classroom were amazing. They were hard. I guess that's what I want to get into all of this for any educator, period. All parts of it are hard. And, that's, I guess, to answer your question of pocket-sized philosophy is just relationships are probably the most important thing that you can build. And not judging a book by its cover and not thinking one way about a person or a situation and realizing that they are different and that they bring so much to the table. And just, what a relationship with a student or a teacher or a parent can do to change outcomes is really my biggest thing. I'm with Miss Calhoun this semester, Miss Patches Calhoun at Della Davidson. She's
friend
awesome.
of the podcast. There we go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, I've always known that she has high expectations. Like, I've known that outside looking in. Della's like the school to be at in Oxford. But being on the inside of seeing how much passion that she brings to the table of just truly wanting to see continuous improvement, continuous growth. Yeah, this is great, but how can I be better? It's a fire that, gets ignited and you just want to keep pushing. And so I guess my philosophy is just being there for people.
Yeah. Well, and then, so then that goes back to your moment of listening and learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like how important that is. And like, there you go, right? Yeah. Fantastic. You participate in any 30-second dance parties over at Della?
We have not done a 30-second dance party. We are having a Fun Friday dance party that's coming up.
Nice.
It has been very interesting to see how it is funny to watch Miss Calhoun because she can be in serious thought about data and us talking about proficiency, and then somebody comes in the room that she needs to have a 30-second dance party for, and there she is. She's meeting that person where they are and doing it. And so it's been funny to watch that switch. But yeah, it's a different world, but it's fun.
I didn't know you're at Della right now.
Yes.
So when I walk into Della, I literally start tearing up. Like, I was at a PLC with Ms. Smith and Kimmy, I think Kimmy Day was there, and Kayla, just Kayla Luke and Cameron Long, all these former student, Hannah Farnlong.
They're so good.
And it's just and Ms. Smith had both my kids, and just she, oh my gosh, her BAM, it is just
Yes.
And even and Claire and Valerie Buford too. It's just and I guess that maybe that goes back to the this idea of it's the investment of those teachers in my kid, and you're providing the environment for that beautiful stuff to happen. And so
and learning that. I think those are two of the things that I've learned. That's why I do like that the Principal Corps does, where you are at a secondary school and an elementary school so that you can see both sides of the world.
That's a great idea.
Who thought of that? Yeah. They did great.
Yeah. Check. Brilliant. Yeah.
But so, even coming from the high school and being in a world where I was going to be a kindergarten teacher, and then I've spent my entire career not in kindergarten.
Yeah.
being back in that elementary mindset has been very, very cool to see. But I'll say it from both leaders. How much they care about their people is evident. And so that goes back to, I guess, my pocket-sized philosophy of I'm seeing that modeled for me every day in these administrators, and it's really awesome. Carly Harrison's the assistant principal there, and she's being a wonderful kind of help mentor.
Yeah.
You know, when you're thrown into it, you're kind of both of there. I'm both of there at their beck and call. So, you know, one minute I'm working closely with Miss Calhoun, and one minute I'm working closely with Miss Harrison. Same with Miss McNeely and Mr. Goolsby. But they all had so much that I could take from them and learn.
What an education you're getting. That's great. So, awesome. That's great. Thank you so much.
You're
for
welcome
doing
so
this.
much.
This is so wonderful. I have to have Dr. Monroe take a listen because she's missing some pearls out there. So thank you. Thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely.
And thank you to all of you out there for listening to The Road to Better Teaching. This episode may be over, but the road to better teaching never ends. Please subscribe to the podcast so you are notified when the next episode is ready for you to listen. And if you like what you hear, please rate and review the podcast. And you can also share the podcast with someone you feel may be interested in these stories of educator development. If you want to find any links to the resources mentioned, you can check out the show notes for this episode at theroadtobetterteaching.com or wherever you found this podcast. And finally, thank you to all you listeners out there for taking the road to better teaching. This world is a better place because you have used the gifts you have been given to teach others. And this has been an Abaddon Planet production.